Do you hear that? Yeah, it's BioCup time, and that's what today's episode's going to be all about. We're going to be focusing on remixes, revamps, all sort of stuff relating to the preliminary round of the BioCup. So you might be like, what's a BioCup? Well, the BioCup is a yearly Bionicle contest, which is held within the Bionicle community, and it's kind of the big, exciting, awesome Bionicle contest, which a whole bunch of people very often participate in. There's often at least sort of, 80 to 100 participants, and there's some really, really killer cool prizes that you can win if you're a part of the BioCup. Whether you actually get in the sort of top 3 or not, you can still win prizes. There's different raffles and all sorts of things, so it's a really exciting time to, get some free stuff, but also just to be a part of a really cool community contest where you can build stuff, you can stretch your skills, and just learn a little bit more about how to build Lego and try to beat some of your friends or some of the people you might look up to as builders in this fun competition. It's not necessarily about winning. I think it's just important to just have a bit of fun in a contest like this, but hey, it's BioCup time, and I tend to cover the BioCup, and I'm going to pretty much do that this year. Might be a little bit more tame than normal. My aim is to just focus maybe on some of my favorites from each round. I won't necessarily go very comprehensive like I have in past years, but I might just tie these into the weekly episodes and just do specific episodes based around what the theme of each round will be, or just sort of, covering some of the entries from maybe past BioCup contests or the current one, that sort of thing. But anyway, that's enough of that today. Let's start diving into this theme. And hey, maybe you're like, I don't care about the BioCup. I don't want to enter. None of that, whatever. There's still a lot you can learn from this episode, I reckon. There's still some really awesome concepts, some really cool MOCs that we're going to be talking about today. So hopefully watching this, whether you plan to enter or not, can give you a bit of inspiration for some stuff that you might want to build yourself. So definitely worth sitting down, putting your feet up, grabbing some pieces, and having a think, having a listen, having some fun. So before we begin, let's talk about what I mean by the theme today, and how I'm going to do that is to just read what the theme for the preliminary round is for the BioCup. If you're like, hey, this BioCup thing does sound good, there'll be links in the description below for where you can read a bit more about the BioCup contest. Be sure to read all the stuff on the Flickr group because that's really important. You'll know all the rules, all the stuff, everything will be good. So the theme of Remixed. What it says here on the Flickr group and what I will be talking about today is trying to see how far away you can get from Bionicle while still being recognizable. So you could maybe envision Kupaka in Ice Planet getup. Ice Planet, of course, being an older Lego theme. You could envisage the Dikapi, an old Bionicle Rahi, as a steam locomotive. Maybe you could envision the Great Toa Helrix as a Toa of Sports instead. Anything kind of goes there, What sort of stuff could you do? How could you take an original Bionicle character or concept or MOC or idea and really stretch the limits or make it sort of fit something else that's a little bit more crazy and different? So it's kind of a bit different from the idea of just like slapping a Bionicle mask onto some random thing. It's more like finding a really cool way of like connecting ideas together in that sense. Things that seem fitting, things that seem like a really good combo that just kind of works together in that sense. So basically, the idea is that it has to be an entity or thing that derives from the Bionicle universe and lore. So head over to the Bionicle wiki or look at some of the original sets and characters and just play around with that. So this specific round of the BioCup is focusing on the creativity of your idea, how you've specifically built the MOC, as well as just the general kind of thoughts and opinions that the judges will have as well. So that's all that sort of stuff there, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So if that's still not quite clear for you, I've got some personal suggestions that I think could work really well for ideas or concepts that you could use for this round of the BioCup. All of these ideas, feel free to take them, feel free to use them, make them your own. I don't mind. I'm just trying to throw out some ideas that I myself had that you could play around with. So take these, run with them, do what you want. So what do I mean by revamps remixing? What does the BioCup mean by that? Maybe you could do something like Steampunk Pahatu. So it's Pahatu, but he's reimagined with like a smokestack, gears, and a gentlemanly look, perhaps, to fit that steampunk aesthetic. You could maybe do Black Fantasy Onowa. It's Onowa, but he looks like some kind of crazy, weird, Lovecraftian monster thing. Black Fantasy, of course, being a more sort of Lego-focused sort of genre that Nan and Z made up. I did do a Biss episode on it ages back, so you could always check that out if you want. You could do something like Mayor Makuta. You know, it's Makuta, but he's got like a top hat and a monocle, and he's the mayor of the city, but he's a corrupt mayor and he's evil. You know, it's that sort of cool combination of stuff, things that kind of make sense for some of these characters, or maybe even don't quite make sense, like the, you know, Lovecraftian Onowa, but it's just like, screw it, why not? Let's just combine these two things and see if we can make it work, you know? Might even be something like that. It's color scheme wise, you know, Steampunk Bahatu he's got that sort of brown to him. Sure, that kind of fits the steampunky look. Why not? You know, it could make a lot of sense, or it could not, but you could make it work, you know? Some other stuff you could do, Vanilla Ice Cream Nuju, you know? He's a tower of ice, you know, ice cream. I don't know. You could be crazy, you could be silly with it, you don't have to take it too seriously. And you could build an ice cream. That sounds like heaps of fun. You could do rock and roll legend Nuparu Anaika, because, I mean, come on, have you seen his helmet? He looks like a rock and roll legend. You could totally see him shredding guitar. That would make total sense. So, you know, do something like that. You could do Life Coach Mudanui. You know, he's wearing the Mask of Life. It only kind of makes sense that he would be good at giving you life advice. So, you know, Life Coach Mudanui. You could do Angel Hully. You know, she has angel wings already. It kind of makes sense. You could just really lean into that angelic look, and, you know, it still sort of seems to be fitting for Hully. And the final idea I've got for you today, but there'll be many more as we go, is Maku the McDonald's employee. You know, he's got Mac in his name. He's already halfway there with the branding. He's good. So, you know, what does he do to make some money on the side? You know, he works at McDonald's. It makes sense. Apologies for a little bit of a longer intro there. I was trying to keep it short so we can just dive straight into the MOCs, but I figured that was important so that you know what this round of the BioCup is all about, and that you know what this episode's going to be all about. So, let's now dive into the first MOC that we have today that fits that idea of remixing and revamping MOCs. We have Aquazone Gully by Thomas Harding. So I spoke about this sort of briefly before. It was kind of in the description for the BioCup. What about a cool idea of combining an older LEGO theme with a more traditional Bionicle character, especially whether maybe that theme actually fits with the idea of this character as well, which it does here, you know. Aquazone was a really cool LEGO theme, which was all sort of about like exploring underwater in cool submarines and other aquatic stuff, for lack of a better term. There were good guys, there were bad guys, you know, it had the aquatic theme. Makes sense for, you know, Bionicle, and it makes sense for someone like Gully, who is, of course, a tower of water. So I think this is a pretty fitting combo. Of course, you could pick any other random LEGO theme you want and just try and shoehorn it in with another Bionicle character. It doesn't necessarily need to make sense, but, you know, I guess you might get more points in the contest if it does, but maybe you're not building it for the contest and you just really like the idea of combining Orient Explorers with Turaga Vakama, because why not? He would look great with a Johnny Thunder hat on, you know he would. But still, we've kind of covered stuff like this in past Bionicle episodes of the Bionicle Inspiration series, where you've taken kind of the really cool color schemes of some of the older LEGO themes like Classic Space or M-Tron or Rock Raiders, for example. And some of those color schemes are just really, really striking and really nice. Or some of the typical tropes that they might come with, like, you know, magnets in M-Tron, or just some of the different drill pieces from like Power Miners or something perhaps. You know, it can be a really great way to maybe get some inspiration for a character design, is, you know, to just have this cool looking color scheme, have these cool looking specific features, and suddenly half the MOC idea is done, and you can just kind of move forward from there. Or you can pay homage to a theme you really liked and build it into a buildable character with Bionicle, you know? I think this is just a really cool, solid idea, and this is a great example of how good it can look. So let's dive into the MOC specifically. That's the concept here. We'll talk about this really cool weapon design that he's given her Gully here. Almost said Hully, you know? A lot of Ali's in in Bionicle with the water characters. Gully, Hully, Prince Ali, you know, there's a lot. Anyway, I love the fact that a lot of the Aquazone focused stuff, so sort of the yellow and the black on this, it's all using more sort of very curved textured pieces. And a lot of that is typically your CCBS, your Hero Factory pieces, all that sort of stuff. And it has this very specific sort of underwater gear aesthetic to it. It looks like kind of specific diving equipment, you know? Whereas when you look at the more sort of blue-focused areas, like the mask and the feet, for example, it looks very similar to a more traditional Gully. So I like the fact that it very much looks like the Gully has put on this sort of underwater equipment to, you know, help her move around and stuff, or help her move a bit faster, navigate the waters with ease, all that sort of stuff. So I like that there's that quite clear distinction between the two there. But also, you know, that is one thing that you'd be judged on in the BioCup, is how you do your color blocking and stuff. So the colors are all kind of clearly blocked out, as well as the textures are all sort of very distinct there. So it would certainly get you a few more points if you did something similar to that. And I think it also just kind of looks nice, the fact that you can very clearly see the difference between the equipment she's wearing and just her, normal body sort of thing. So I quite like that. I also like some of these little subtle details in some of these pictures here, like these little crabs that use some of those Ruru masks and have the cool little ball joint eyes like that. They're adorable. And just a little hints of seaweed thrown around there. There's nothing wrong with doing that, whether it's for the BioCup or just for whatever you want to build. Stuff like that I think really enhances the pictures that you take and really starts to paint a picture of the sort of environment that you might find this MOC. It's just, it's just really cool to see in my opinion. I love that. Also just a really solid color scheme too, blue, black, yellow like that. Just really pops on this MOC. It's awesome. So a lot of little fun things going on here. Really cool concept. And what a great idea too to take a look at different LEGO themes and sort of shoehorn them in together with a pre-existing Bionicle character and creating some really fitting combos that just make sense for the characters and really kind of emphasize some of the cooler points of them. Thomas has actually done a few other Bionicle MOCs that fit with this theme fusion idea in that sense, so be sure to take a look at some of his stuff. There'll be links in the description if you want a little bit more inspiration there. On to the next MOC now. This is by Explosive Tortuga, and this is Cyber Kupaka. So I like that this is essentially just a different take on Kupaka. I guess that is something you could very easily do for the BioCup, or just that you might want to do on your own just for a little bit of fun, is just reimagine the character. Doesn't necessarily need to be taken into any weird corners or combined with a pre-existing LEGO theme or whatever. You could just be like, hey, this is Kupaka, but he's a knight. Or hey, this is Kupaka, but he's just got a more sort of sleek look and a different color scheme. You may not get as many points for it. I think you'll certainly get more points if you go really creative out there and different with stuff. But also, this is a really solid MOC and still a very distinct, different take on Kupaka. So I think that, or Kopaka, I always do that. I always say it wrong. It's just how I grew up saying it. I apologize. Still, this version of Kupaka, damn it, is so vastly different to how the set looks. At least the way I look at it, And the introduction of the red as well is just a really fitting, different color that just looks really cool. So there's a lot going on here that's good. And I think it's something that's a little bit more of a subtle approach to the theme, but one that works really, really well. So let's dive in. What do I like about this guy here? I love the shield design here, using just that typical white dish piece, which I believe is the piece that came on Onowan Nuva, but it has that sort of red outline around it. To my knowledge, that specific piece there comes from the old LEGO X-Pod sets. I love those sets when they came out. They were really cool, and they had this interesting sort of canister that the set actually came in, but you could actually use it as a part of the builds and also to like store what you would build in these X-Pod sets. The sort of lids on these X-Pods, you could kind of twist them and pop them out, and they still work as Lego pieces. And, if you attach it onto that dish like that, you do get this very nice sort of rim around the dish there, which looks really, really nice. So really solid use of that piece there, and a great way of just adding that beautiful accent of red on this brilliant version of Kupaka. I also love the inclusion of a lot more sort of like a smoother texture and aesthetic to Kupaka here, which you could argue that Kupaka Nuva had that before, but it was more primarily silver. This one's just stripped the silver away and has a bit more white specifically. And I love all the different CCBS pieces being used here, but the fact that he's really spammed a lot of those Ultra Build shoulder pieces. We see them used on the shoulders, we see them used on Kupaka's mighty pecs, and we see them being used on his kneecaps there as well. I always really loved that piece. I think it's just really cool, and it's great to see it being used so much here that it really just creates a sense of unity and togetherness on this MOC here. All the pieces just kind of tie together. If you're looking for some more complex building techniques to maybe get you a little bit more points in the BioCup, that's certainly something to consider, just to have a little bit of consistency throughout the MOC so that the textures are all similar, the colors are all sort of not too crazy, that it's also just fits nicely into one. It works, So I certainly think that's a pretty easy technique that you can do, but I think it goes a long way just to, do a little bit of part spamming, just repeat pieces throughout, and the MOC just sort of all fits into one in that sense. It's really cool. But overall, yeah, I really like it. The name Cyber Kupaka kind of makes it feel like maybe this is like a futuristic Kupaka, and it's not necessarily like a cyberpunk version of Kupaka, although that would be super cool. Someone do that. But, maybe that's a different way that you want to approach a MOC. What would they look like in the past, in the present, or in the future? Have a think about it, Anyway, very cool version of Cyber Kupaka there. Let's move on to the next MOC. This is by Mitch Henry, a judge of the BioCup. So maybe worth taking a look at some of the stuff he builds and he likes and he does, because, hey, might give you that upper edge in the contest if you know what the judges specifically like and you lean into that yourself. It would, probably get you a few more points, something to think about there. But this is Onowan Nuva by Mitch Henry. This is a really abstract, different take for Onowa, and I like that because, well, it fits with the theme that we're going with today. But let me read a bit of the description here. It says, Onowan Nuva of Earth watches over the land and intervenes to restore balance when it's threatened. The Tohunga believe that Onowan is responsible for earthquakes, inflicting them on the villagers when he is displeased with the way that they are caring for his domain. I love that. It takes the idea of the Toa being more like kind of gods or deities that the Matoran or the Tohunga worship. And it's very similar to sort of like olden day beliefs of gods, that it's like, if you displease them, that they'll punish you, or there'll be like a thunderstorm and that's caused by them, or because Onowa is a Toa of Earth, there'll be earthquakes because you've upset Onowa. I really like that idea, and I think that really fits with this contest too. The idea of, hey, what happens if I take the original concept or idea of this character and I take it even further, I stretch it into new places. So that way you're still very similar to what was there before, but you just sort of tweak one or two things and suddenly it's entirely different. I still love the look for Onowa here, because it looks nothing like Onowa, and that's great. But I still kind of get the idea that it's Onowa, because, it's got Onowan Nuva's weapons, it's got, I don't know, that's kind of it, really. I was like, no, it's got some other similar things that make it look like Onowa. Not really. Not at all. But see, I think that's a good thing, because it's like I said at the start, this starts to look more like some sort of abstract Lovecraftian deity of sorts, that they almost don't even have a human-like form. They are totally different or almost difficult to comprehend because they have so much power and they're so godlike and blessed, or whatever sort of term you want to use to describe it there. I think that's awesome. I think this is a really great way of approaching a sort of godlike deity mock that, it doesn't really have a head. It has multiple arms. It has weird legs that have this sort of funky pattern to them of sorts. It's just so different and out there. It's so abstract. It's not really your sort of typical everyday mock. And I think if you start to lean into this sort of side of things for the BioCup, you're really going to shine. You're really going to get far because you're thinking outside the box. You're doing something that's against the norm. And that sort of stuff, I think that's really what the judges will be looking for, Additionally as well, you might be looking at the lower legs on this mock here, and you might be like, what is that weird purple piece? Well, this is from a really weird LEGO theme called Snap, which I guess you could kind of classify as, I don't know, it kind of wasn't construction, was it? It was more like a sort of Technic analog. But essentially what Snap was this sort of discontinued LEGO theme, which was so vastly different to LEGO. It had this entirely different system of construction. It was very like Connects, which I don't know if anyone knows what Connects is. It's sort of a non-LEGO adjacent building toy that I used to have some when I was a kid, but it's not specifically LEGO, so it doesn't quite count. But Snap, it had these weird pieces and it had these cool sort of purple connectors, and Mitch has used some of them there, So to my knowledge, I haven't actually read the rules, but I know this is, which I totally should have, my bad, but hey, you can be not like me and you can go read the rules on the BioCup, so you know what you need to do for this round of the BioCup. But in the past years, you have not been able to use non-official LEGO pieces. However, Snap totally counts, and it kind of could give you a nice sneaky advantage. Why? Because, I don't know, are other people going to be using weird, obscure pieces like that? No. But if you have some in your collection, you can use them, and you might have a little sneaky advantage there. You get to play with some weird, crazy pieces that no one else has played with, or no one else is going to be using. So you might have an upper hand there, So if you have some weird, obscure LEGO pieces in your collection, might be worth considering putting them into your mock if they work, if they fit, because, hey, maybe not everyone else is going to be using those either. So something to consider for sure. But really great to see them being used here. Love your work, Mitch. A really weird and obscure mock, but one that I think fits the theme well and is just really different, which is really nice. Let's move on to the next mock. I love this one. This is by Aiden Builds, and this is Oxturn. So we all know Nocturne, a really awesome Bionicle Titan set there. Titan being, it kind of was a Titan set. It was a more expensive set, but he wasn't that large. He was only sort of a little bit taller than your typical average everyday Bionicle set. But Nocturne was great. He was a really cool looking character, great color scheme, and just a nice guy. And then some guys came together and they did this really fun collab called Oops All Nocturne, which is hilarious. Essentially, they took the idea of like, hey, let's all build a bunch of mocks, but let's slightly tweak the name of Nocturne to make it something different. So this is Oxturn, which is Nocturne, but as an ox. There were other fantastic examples like Rockturn, or what have we got here? Nocturne, like, but with a K, so like, knocking. Or Blockturn, just a system version of Nocturne. Or Crocturn, like a crocodile Nocturne. All sorts of cool stuff like that. So maybe that's something you could do yourself. Take a pre-existing Bionicle character and slightly change their name somehow, you know? Like, for example, you could take someone like Kongu and change it to Songu. So, you know, he plays for a band. Just change that K to an S. I don't know. You know, there's other examples. You can think of them, I'm sure. You can have fun playing with names, and I'm sure you'll come up with lots of fun ideas. But yeah, you know, a little bit of fun wordplay, and you might come up with some cool stuff, you know? Something to consider, and I think a really funny way of approaching this theme, that's for sure. So let's take a look at this mock. I really enjoyed the use of the Hulk lime green torso piece as sort of the belly on this ox here. Actually works quite well. It really does look like the belly of that of an ox or a cow or whatever. Just works really well. And I always find that piece to be a little bit difficult to use just because it is so large and just big, you know. But works perfectly here for the belly of an ox. I also enjoy just the big mesh of all those glow-in-the-dark blue pieces there to sort of form almost like a shell over the back of this ox, which kind of ties it back to Nocturne and just the idea of it sort of looking more like an aquatic creature, like a crab or something, perhaps. I think it works really well. It's really cool. I also like the inclusion of those small lime green Hero Factory shell pieces for the like hooves on this ox. Actually works surprisingly well, you know. I wouldn't have thought that you could use that so perfectly for the feet on an ox. Heck, you could even use them as hooves on a horse, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So something to consider. And hey, if you are planning on building some type of Rahi, maybe you could do a very similar leg or foot design there. Even still, just seeing Nocturne's mask with those big goofy horns coming out of it and his sort of little happy smile there. I don't know, it works really well. I think this Nocturne collab 1 was just really awesome. But 2, you could get some good ideas from it. So be sure to take a look at the links in the description there and see some of the other versions of Nocturne that were made for this collab. It might give you a bit of inspiration as well. On to the second last mock now. This is by Joxon, and this is Spirit of Fire. So this is using a bunch of third-party parts. So these are non-official LEGO pieces, like we said before. You wouldn't be allowed to do that for the BioCup, but hey, maybe you're not building for the BioCup. Do what you want. Still, I like what this mock is sort of standing for here, and just the kind of general look of it. There's something about this that looks so almost like cartoonish. Joxon himself said that this was inspired by online animations, and I really think that's fitting. This is such a different look for Tahu here, and I mean, is it Tahu? It doesn't actually say that, I guess. Does it say that in the tags? It doesn't. Okay, well look, there you go. I thought this was Tahu, but it just says Spirit of Fire, so it's technically not, but I also just really like that. That's what I saw from this, as I looked at this and went, this is almost sort of like a cartoon interpretation of Tahu. It's not, but it kind of looks that way, doesn't it? So that kind of reminded me of a few other things as well, of like, maybe you could take a look at some fan art or some artistic drawings or concept art, all sorts of stuff like that for different Bionicle characters, and you could reimagine them in that light. This version of Tahu that's not Tahu looks like an animated version. Could you maybe build a version of Tahu that looks very similar to how he did in the Mask of Light movie? Or could you build him in a way that looks like, a little bit more like some sort of concept art, perhaps, you know? What sort of specific art style could you try and replicate in Bionicle? This one might be a little bit more different. It might be a little bit more of a challenge, but hey, maybe if you're up to it, could be a cool way of approaching this theme, is just reimagining it in a very different style. Whether that's, in a similar way to when you're drawing something, you could make it look more cartoonish, or make it look hyper-realistic, or you could just make it look like a sort of silly, like childlike sketch, using crayons or something, How could you physically represent it in a very different look or design, Or it could even be something different. Like, I'm going to build Tahu, but it's kind of like an evil version of Tahu, and he's got more of a sort of bestial look to him, perhaps, And make sure it fits with the theme of the contest, of course. But, there's a lot of different ways that you could approach something, whether it's sort of like the art style, the way that it's been built, the pieces that you use, the textures you have, the design of it in general. There's a lot to think about there. It's really cool. Some quick little notes on this mock, because I think it's awesome. One, as long as it's not for the BioCup, great idea to be playing with third-party pieces, because, hey, you get some really cool results like this. I mean, that mask alone looks awesome. The weapon, the shins, all the different armor parts that he's used, they look pretty cool. Sure, they're not Lego, but you get some pretty cool results with it. I like that a lot. I also love to, just with what I was saying with the art style, the fact that all of the sort of like orange on this specifically, using some of those, system cone pieces, using some of those Hero Factory shell pieces like that, they do look more cartoonish in nature. It looks very similar to, like the G2 Bionicle animation that they would do for some of those, Netflix series and all sorts of other, just little promo stuff that they did. I always enjoyed that. So, I don't know, if you want to try and somehow, like, replicate that style, might be worth doing something very similar to what Joxon's done here on the non-third-party areas of this mock, Go for a very sort of slimmed-down, specific look like this, using pretty much quite minimal pieces and leaning a little bit more into your system there. You could get a very just different aesthetic. Something to consider, something to play around with, I think, because I think Joxon really nailed it here. This is a very different take on a Bionicle. It looks awesome. All right, on to the final mock now. This is by Brick Brickelson, and this is Bork the Cleaner. So what I like about this is the fact that it is a Borok, yes, but it's so vastly different to how the original set looked. This one has this weird kind of crazy, almost sort of like bug-like look to it. It's got multiple eyes now, and these eyes are massive. You can see almost like its brains and its guts just like kind of pouring out of the top of its head. The weapon pieces are more like sort of big shield, crazy, weird razor things, They're very similar to how it originally looked, but still vastly different. And it's almost sort of like drooling, and it's got weird like kind of mouth claws, and it's just kind of abstract. It's like looking at some weird, crazy, deformed bug or something, or like a zombie. It's weird, but it's really cool weird, So maybe that could be a way that you approach this, is completely reimagining a set, but just giving it such a different and majorly distinctive, odd look that still kind of pays homage to the original, but is so vastly different at the same time. Like, this still is very obvious and looks a lot like a Borok, but also looks nothing like a Borok at the same time, So it's that. Maybe you don't want to depart too far from the original. Well, don't. Stick to the original, but take what was existing there before and turn it up to 11. Make it so odd, different, enlarged, bigger, times it by 10, all that sort of stuff. See what you can do, because I think this is a great way of reimagining a Borok, and there's some really cool stuff going on. Let's dive into that, shall we? So I love that he's given him these little sort of like pincers, which is, quite similar to the original Borok, but they were just, little white claws, but now they're upside down vulture heads from some Chima Ultra Build sets back in the day. And it works really well. Those upside down like that, they start to look a little bit less like those vulture heads and look like sort of little stubby claws of sorts. It's really cool, or pincers rather. And then I believe that those eyepieces are, I think they're from city sets. I think they're from when there was sort of like mining focused sets, and these were kind of like lava boulders that emerged from like volcanoes and stuff. I think that's what those pieces are. But, hey, you could use a whole bunch of different translucent pieces like that to form a very similar looking eye design and, make it big, make it bulging, make it different like that. Can really work well. Additionally, too, when we take a look at the back of this mock, it has this beautiful curve to it, this still sort of ball-like shape, very similar to the original Borok. And it is just simply done by just having that sort of slight curve to those Hero Factory body pieces there in dark red. And I think that's a pretty similar way of achieving that kind of slight curve. It probably is just attached onto your typical Hero Factory limb pieces like that, and it's just sort of slightly angled and attached in some fashion, Doesn't look like a hugely complex technique necessarily. I don't know what it looks like on the inside. Maybe I'm just interpreting it differently. Maybe it is this complex series of things, but still, I like that it does have that same sort of rounded ball shape, but it's been really heavily detailed and armored up, and just really well designed in general. So, really great way of approaching a Borok. Very different, but still very fitting and very similar to the original at the same time. So, that's awesome. So there's been a bunch of different mocks here that fit this remix or remake or revamp theme that we have for today. Hopefully you got a few ideas, and hey, if you are considering to enter the BioCup, be sure to do so. It's a really, really cool contest, and hey, it's just about having a little bit of fun. Doesn't matter if you win, doesn't matter if you lose, doesn't matter if you even don't get past the preliminary round. Just build something because it's fun. I mean, that's what we're here for, isn't it? Just to build stuff and have a good time. So why not use this contest as a platform to do so? And you might even win a prize or two if you enter. So, there's links in the description below to the BioCup Flickr group and all sorts of other stuff, so check that out and read everything that you can on that Flickr group as well, because all the rules, everything you need to know, more information about that preliminary round and future rounds will be there. Check it out and see some of the cool stuff that's entered into the competition as well. It'll be over on that Flickr group when people make their stuff. But yeah, it's only been out a couple days now, this preliminary round, so maybe nothing at the moment, but give it time. You'll see some of the entries there in due course. Additionally, in the description will be links to my own social media. You can check out some of the stuff I've got going on there. You can also check the links in the description to see some of the other stuff that these people have built. And while you're there as well, you can see the submission email where you can submit some of your own MOCs to the show. And I've said many a time how you can do that, so we'll round up the episode there. You can submit if you like. If not, just stay tuned for the next episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series, and I'll see you next time. Thanks you very much for watching. I'll see you soon. Happy building. Bye for now. Join the BioCup.